and we'll do it live. We'll do it live. So, good morning. It's Sunday. I'm drinking a delicious cup of coffee with some chocolatey sprinkles in it that I made. And I'm thinking about Theos. Thinking about Theos this morning. Perfect day to think about Theos because it's Sunday. And the sun is, of course, a light. And so here's the interesting question. This is kind of where I'm going with this thing. I'm looking at the words used in the Bible in the Old Testament, and feel free to give me some input here on what you think about this subject, because I'm not here to just tell you what to think, particularly on the subject of religion. I'm interested in what other people think, but I'm not here to tell you what to think because I am not your pastor. I am not your pastor. You only have one pastor, and that is the Logos, called Christ. That is your pastor, not me. I'm not your pastor. I am kind of like a minister, though, and I think this is kind of what got me onto this subject, was people who call themselves pastors. I don't like pastors because a pastor suggests that you're the guy that's leading the flock of sheep, which was a term or a metaphor in the Bible about Jesus, the Christ, the Logos, the spoken word of God, leading His people, right? But a pastor is not the Logos. The Logos is a real thing. The Logos is a real thing, and you're not the Logos. You could have the Logos, but you're not the Logos. The Logos means reason. The Logos means reason. That's what that word means. It means reason. And it's reason rooted in truth is the Logos. And that's what we call Christ, which is another Greek word meaning the King. Christ is the King. That's what that means. It means the anointed King. Christ actually comes from a word that means oil. So it's like oil, and you're anointing with oil, right? Now, who do you anoint with oil? You anoint the king with oil. You put the oil right here on the king's head, and that says that the priest, in the old days, the priest would anoint the king, and that would say he's been anointed the king by the priest. So in terms of the metaphor used in Christianity, Christ is the anointed king, and he's called the Logos, and he's called the light. I've had these arguments with Freemasons, Muslims, atheists, and some Christians. Haven't had any of these arguments with Jews, because I'm sure we'd have different arguments. No, I did. I tried it. I think I explained it to them. They just didn't respond, which makes sense. Why would they want to hear this? Why would they want to hear about the light and explain that Jesus is actually the light in the story? Which is what I guess they say they're following, but not. I don't know. See, that's the part that confuses me. I don't want to get into that argument too much, but in the Orthodox Judaism, they call God Hashem, which means the light. That's what it means. So in Orthodox Judaism, they worship Hashem, which means the light. And in Christianity, Jesus Christ is called the light, which is the word of God is the light, which is the same in the Old Testament. It's the same in the Old Testament. For some reason, though, the Jews don't know the story, and they don't understand I don't know. I don't want to get too deep in that part yet. What I want to tell you about is when you go back and you read the Bible in the Old Testament, you'll find some interesting words. And one of the first words you'll find in Genesis 1 is the word theos. And theos is used different ways. It's used as, it's spelled as theos, theus, and theon. Theon. And so these are grammatical use, depending on the grammatical use of the word, it'll have a theos or a theus or a theon, depending on how it's used. I suppose that would be the difference between a verb, an adjective, and a noun. I don't know. I don't know grammar that well. We really didn't learn grammar when I was a child and growing up in schools. We didn't learn grammar. But anyway, so but I know what a verb is. I know what an adjective. I know what a noun is. But I believe it has something to do with the way that the word is used. It's either theos, theus, or theon. So I know that. And so when you look at Genesis 1, now why am I looking at Genesis 1 in the first place? Because I read John 1. And in John 1 it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And this is the thing that explains everything. This is the thing that explains everything. If you don't catch that first verse in John 1:1, then none of the rest of the book is going to make sense to you. If you do catch it in John 1:1 through 5, then you can go back and look at Genesis 1, 3 through 5. And you'll see that John 1:1 through 5 is a recitation of Genesis 1, 3 through 5. But let's look at just Genesis 1, the chapter. And when you look at it, you have to understand it's in Greek, and it's in Greek for a reason. It's not just in Greek for no reason, right? Why is it in Greek? Who wrote it in Greek? Like people go, like, I've argued with Muslims and I've argued with these different people, and they think they don't, whatever they think, they don't realize that the Greeks inhabited Syria, Judah, Egypt, as far back as 300 BC. As far back as 300 BC, like they occupied and like inhabited the territory. So the Middle East, what we're talking about, what we called today, we're calling it Turkey, which was Greek at the time. So that's Europe. That's the Greeks, right? That whole territory called Turkey, that was white Greek people. And then Syria, which is right next to it, and then down into what we call Lebanon today. Lebanon means comes from the word Levant or Levi, the tribe of Levi in the Bible. So Levi means white, and that's a reference to the snow-capped mountains of Lebanon. So Levi is white, and then you have Judah below, or Judah, or what else? What other names were used for that territory? I just call it Canaan or whatever. And then down near Gaza was where the Philistines were. They were also from Europe. They were also Greeks. So anyway, and then but in that the Philistines were there in around 1000 BC. This is when the Philistines got there with the Sea People. The Sea People invasion of 1100. The Sea People started fighting with the Egyptians way back in at least back in 1200 BC, and captured territory in Gaza. The Sea People did in around 1000 BC. So around 1000 BC, the Sea People had a land base in Gaza, right there on the Egyptian border, and so anyway, those are the Philistines. But we're not talking about them. We're talking about the Greeks. We're talking about the Greek Old Testament, which is written in Greek. So the question is, because I'm looking at the word theos, and I'm looking at and so if you don't really understand, you might say, well, theos is just Zeus. No, it's not, because the two words existed simultaneously, coincidentally. You had the word theos and you had the word Zeus, and they're spelled differently. It's not the same word as far as I can tell. So that's number one. So theos is not Zeus. Theos is a different word. And theos has a specific meaning to the Greeks. So theos has a specific meaning to the Greeks going back to 500 BC. It meant something to the Greeks going back to 500 BC. And what it meant to the Greeks in 500 BC was the divine source of the universe. So the Greeks already had this concept of a creator God, a monotheism. In fact, the word monotheism is Greek, and it's a reference to theos. Okay, so now I'm sitting here thinking, did the Greeks invent monotheism? Because we think of monotheism as coming to us from the Jews. That's what oh, the Jews gave us monotheism. That's what I heard my whole entire life, that the Jews gave us monotheism, or we got it from wherever, right? Well, that's why I'm asking this question, because I'm looking at the Greek writings from 500 BC, before they were in contact with Jews. They weren't, if you go back and you look at the history books of the ancient Greeks, they're not talking about Jews. They're going all over the world, these historians, and none of them are reporting back about any Jews. But if you go to Athens, you'll find that they had already developed monotheism. In other words, what I'm saying is the Greeks invented monotheism themselves. They didn't get it from anywhere else. And so it's because, okay, let me slow down here. You've got the word theos. Theos is not Zeus. Zeus is spelled differently. The two words existed at the same time. One is the god Jupiter, okay, of the pagan gods. You have Zeus, and theos means something entirely different. And it means the divine source of the universe, the creator of the universe, and the source of reason, which is logos. So now you go and then I said, well, let's do this. Why did I do? Because is there a picture of theos? Right? You can find a picture of Zeus. You can find a picture of Kronos. You can find a picture of Aphrodite. Can you find a picture of theos? So let's do an image search for theos. So I do an image search for theos. I don't get an image. There is no image of theos, because theos is the divine source of the universe. And it was the Greeks who invented monotheism. Now, does that mean nobody else in the world invented monotheism? No, I'm not saying that. But when we look at the Bible, was it a monotheism? It was in some ways, or some people call it monolatry, which meaning there was one God out of many that was idolized. But I don't want to go too deep in the woods on that part, other than what I'm trying to say is, when you read the Old Testament, I've got the Blue Letter Bible right here, right? It's called the blueletterbible.org. Beautiful Bible. You can do the whole thing in Greek. And you'll notice when you're reading Genesis 1 that it said that anywhere where the word God, the reference to God is used, it's theos or theo, depending on how it's used grammatically, or theonic. Theon is another way it's used somewhere in the Bible. Could be the New Testament that I was looking at where I saw it there. Yes, that was in John 1. I saw it used as theon. So theos, theon. So theos is the basic form of the word, is right here written in Genesis. Now you say, well, that's not the Hebrew Bible. Okay, well, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me what Hebrew is, okay? Do you know what Hebrew is? Do you know what it is? Do you think you know what it is? Okay. Well, when can you find me some Hebrew Bibles? You can find me Hebrew Bibles that were written in 600 to 800 AD. 600 to 800 AD, which is the modern era. Okay. There's no okay. I'm not saying they didn't exist. I actually know which ones did exist, and I'm going to tell you in a second. But when you tell me Hebrew, when you tell me the Hebrew Bible, oh, that's the Greek. The Greeks took the Bible, they rewrote the Old Testament. Okay, And so why don't you show me where this old Hebrew Bible is? Okay, because the one that you have was written in 600 to 800 AD by the rabbis. This is 600 years after the uh, the arrest, torture, and murder of Christ, the Logos. They wrote the Hebrew Bible, and I tried to read Maimonides, or however you want to say his name is, a guide for the perplexed. Yeah, that's written if you want to be perplexed. If you want to be confused and you want to hear a big word salad, I've never heard a bigger word salad than Maimonides. King James is polluted. Okay. I'm interested. Like I said, I don't know if you heard the beginning of my thing, but I actually want to hear what other people have to say. So I want to hear what your opinions are. So definitely tell me. We can talk about it because it's an interesting subject. King James is polluted. Possibly. We can talk about that. But when I tried, just not too long ago, I sat down and I said, well, let me check out this book that the rabbis all use. It's written by Maimonides, and it's called The Guide to the Perplexed. And it's just word salad. You don't learn it. I mean, it's just a word salad after word salad after word salad after word salad, right? And so then I'm thinking, this is what Judaism is. It's a bunch of rabbis giving you all their little intricate little thoughts, and it's not telling, because I could explain to you the Bible in a couple sentences. Okay, you have Theos, and Theos speaks his word, which we call the Logos, and the Logos is the light because it's the wisdom, and that's it. Game over. You know everything. There's nothing else to know. There's God, there's his word, which is like the light. And the entire book just follows this theme of God and his word and the light. That's it. God and his word, and the word is like the light. And that's why throughout the Bible, there's all these solar themes. There's Jesus and the 12, and there's Noah's Ark going through the old calendar, beginning in spring and going into summer, flooding the earth with light. And then the light recedes through winter, and then they've got a golden ark, and they go around, and the 12 tribes follow the golden ark through the desert. So I'm saying the entire thing can be understood in what I just told you. There's God, there's his word, and there's Phos, the light. So Theos, Logos, Phos. That's all you need to know. Now, if you read Maimonides, you'll spend I don't know how many weeks listening to a word salad and learning nothing, but it's a guide for the perplexed. It's a guide to perplexity. It's a guide to just being confused. Okay. So, but let's talk about the Bible. You said King James Version is polluted. As far as I know, I like the King James Version and I like to read it, but not when I'm reading the Old Testament, because I think that there's better versions of the Old Testament. The Septuagint, of course, which is written in Greek, is good because it gives you, which is where we're going with this. The original Greek was written in 300 BC. So the what we call the Old Testament, which is the first five books of the Pentateuch, or however you want to call it, says the Old Testament was written by the Judeans for Ptolemy, who was the Greek king of Egypt. Okay, so the Greeks invaded Judah and Syria, and they under Alexander, right? Alexander, who was indoctrinated into the philosophy of the Stoic order, of the line of Pythagoras, right? He came out of Greece with his armies, and they grabbed Egypt, and they grabbed Judah, and they grabbed Syria, and they took Chaldea, and they went all the way to India. Okay, so he took everything and they replaced it with their language and their culture and everything, right? And so they're down there in Egypt, and Ptolemy's building this library in Egypt, the library at Alexandria. And so he says, and so the Greeks wanted all the wisdom to be documented and recorded for the Library of Alexandria. So the Judeans are called to write their books in Greek around 300 BC. And so the Judeans at the time spoke Greek, and they were reading Greek philosophy. In fact, the Judeans at the time, according to the letters of Aristeas, were required by their own people to study Greek philosophy And that was part of becoming an elder of the Judean tribes, according to the letters of Aristeas. That's where I got that information. So they write the Old Testament in Greek themselves. And what do they use for the word God? They wrote the word theos. Theos. So theos is the word that they used for God in 300 BC, the Judeans themselves. Okay, so this says King James is polluted. Genesis says that we are created in God's image, male and female. That's where the enemy got the idea of Baphomet. That's true. That is where they got the idea for Baphomet. That is exactly where they got it. That is exactly where they got that. But anyway, so theos is written into Genesis as the name of God is theos in Genesis. Now, theos has a very specific meaning in Greek philosophy of the order of Heraclitus, I would say. So I would say probably Pythagoras, but more so Heraclitus. Because number one, we don't really have much fragments of anything Pythagoras ever said. We do have the fragments of Heraclitus, and we know that Heraclitus would argue with the sayings of Pythagoras, but maybe that's because they were so similar, they had to argue with each other. Who knows? But Heraclitus, when you read the fragments of Heraclitus, you will see this is 500 BC, that he's already using the word theos, and not to describe a pagan god. And this is what I'm trying to tell people, is that the Greeks in 500 BC, the Greek Stoic order of Heraclitus, they were not worshiping a pagan god. They were worshiping theos, which is the divine source of the universe. So this is 500 BC. They were already worshiping the divine source. They were not converted by the Jews. They were not converted by Paul. That's what I'm trying to say. Paul did not convert the Greeks. The Greeks were worshiping theos in Athens in 500 BC. And this continued on with Zeno of Citium in 300 BC. And he's talking about logos, which he got from Heraclitus. Now, the word logos, so over time, we're talking 500 years plus. So Heraclitus first defines it as the governing principle of the universe. So God's word is called the logos, which is an idea, which is the idea which governs the universe. And this is what you would call natural law. Okay, so natural laws are ideas, which are the laws governing the universe and the manifestation of energy in the universe. So this is what Heraclitus said in 500 BC. So this logos is like, you have the creator called Theos, which is not a pagan god, and then you have logos, which is the ideas of God, the idea, the spoken word. It's thought of metaphorically as the spoken word, right? So it's the word or the logos, and this is the source of the universe. So when you read Genesis 1, God speaks, and he says, "Let there be light," and there is light. Right? So he speaks, and his word is light. That's all you have to know, man. If you know that, you know the entire Bible. So the Greeks were not actually converted, but found it necessary to rationalize the story of Jesus as a purely intellectual exercise. I don't know. No, the Greeks, that's an interesting question. So the Greeks were not actually converted, but found it necessary to rationalize the story. Well, what I'm saying is the Greeks already had theos 500 years before Christ. They were the Stoics, not all the Greeks. You know, in Athenian Greek society, you had the Stoic order, which followed logos, right? So they were following logos. This is 500 years before Christ. From 500 BC to 300 BC to 100, to the time of Christ, they were following this thing called the logos. That was the whole philosophy. In other words, the whole philosophy wasn't super complicated, and it shouldn't be, because there's not a lot of parts to it. It's just the logos, meaning reason. So the Stoic order was trying to, in other words, the Stoic order said that the gateway to Theos, the creator of the universe, was through reason and truth. And so the more you would be connected to truth and hearing God's truth and keeping and keeping everything else out but the truth, and just dedicating your mind to the truth, then this is your connection to God, is through the logos, which is reason rooted in truth. And so this is what the Stoics were doing. All this, everything I'm telling you is basically lost as far as understanding, because it's taught in the universities, but it's taught by a bunch of Marxist weirdos. So they don't understand what I'm telling you. But anyway, so that's what happened. So later, so your question is, so the Greeks were not actually converted, but found it necessary. Okay, so I don't fully understand your question, but it's a good question. What I'm saying is the Athenians before 500 years BC, they had theos, and they were, logos means reason, and this is how they stayed connected to the truth of God. And so then 500 years later, in 300 years later, in 300 BC, the Judeans were studying all this material and following the Greek philosophers, because they were now part of the Greek Empire and they actually liked it. So so this is according to the letters of Aristeas, is what I'm telling you. If you read that, you'll see that the Judeans, I don't know how true it all is, but this is the only document that I anytime you have one of these old documents from history, you don't necessarily know how true it is, but you have to just, like, this is what we have and this is what they're saying, and maybe this is what happened. So they're saying that the Judean elders came along and said, we're going to write the Old Testament for you in Greek, and then they explained the reasoning, and that they were studying Greek, and that they were required to learn Greek philosophy to be an elder of Judah. So they write the whole Genesis through Genesis and Exodus and all the old 5 books. They write it all in Greek, and when they do, they use the word theos. They use the word theos, which is the Greek word for the divine source of the universe. It's a specific thing. Theos is not Zeus. Theos is not some pagan god. Theos has a specific meaning in Greek philosophy, which is the divine source of the universe. And so that's what the Judeans wrote into the Bible in 300 BC. Now, what I'm saying is, all the other versions of the Bible, if there were ancient scriptures that were written in a different language, they were basically lost. You could say, well, there's the Samaritan Bible, which was retained in Aramaic, and that's probably true. And I think that's pretty much the other one. So they have this other Bible. They say, well, we have the Hebrew Bible, the rabbis do, and they call it the Masoretic, the Masoretes. That was written AD. That was written like 600 to 800 AD or 400 AD or sometime. It was written later in a version of Hebrew that they invented, because it wasn't the original Hebrew. It wasn't the original Hebrew. Now, I don't want to get too complicated on this because there's a lot of information, but so the Greeks, whatever. So we know what Paleo Hebrew looked like. We do know that Paleo Hebrew looked like Phoenician, and Paleo Greek looked like Phoenician, and so the Phoenicians were the sea people, along with the Philistines and a bunch of other seafaring people that were all out in the Mediterranean, which is where the Greek islands are, and where Cyprus is, and where all these islands are out there. Now, this script was different than the ancient Akkadian script, which is what the old books were all written in. What I would call original Hebrew would be Akkadian, that old Akkadian Sumerian script. So you had Samaria and you had Akkadian. As far as languages, you had Sumerian, then you had Akkadian, and the Akkadian script was used by actually people who spoke different languages other than the Semitic, because the Hittites and the people up in the north, which were the Aryans, also wrote in the Akkadian. What do you call it, that script? With the little press things on a clay tablet. So all the old books were written in that. When the Sea People came in around 1000 BC, they changed the writing. And now everything's written in this new script, which we call Phoenician or whatever. But it came from the sea people, I think. And so it's a sister language of Aramaic and Greek, or they're basically sister languages. So without getting too complicated, in 300 BC, the Bible is written in Greek. Now we know that. Well, actually, I don't know. So, we know that there's words in the Bible for you have the word Israel, and El, of course, means God, and Yahoo, of course, means God. And there's other words in the Bible that refer to gods, like Sin is actually an old Akkadian name for a moon god, and El was originally a wind god, and what else? Sometimes you'll have like Amos is one of the prophets, and Amos is actually an Egyptian word meaning Amosis, which means God, which means born of the moon. But so that doesn't mean that they were continuing to worship pagan gods. It's just that these names for gods became generalized, meaning God. So El just became the general name for God. And sometimes they would use or they would use Yahoo. But what does this say? Was Theos and Logos a movement posed to turn away or move on from Zeus or Apollo? Or is Logos and Theos just the next determination of the system? Excellent question. It was a complete abandonment of the pagan gods. That's what I'm trying to say. The Athenian Stoics who followed Logos were not pagans, and they had abandoned the pagan gods. And this is why they were actually, I believe, was it Socrates that drank the poison? They had abandoned the pagan gods. They were see, that was the whole point. Your question is perfect. The follow of Theos and Logos was the exact thing that you're suggesting, that they had abandoned the pagan gods. That doesn't mean the pagan gods didn't still exist in Greek culture. It's just the Stoics weren't following them. They didn't care about any of that because they knew it was all just fanciful, right? They were looking for the truth. So they were seeking the truth. And the truth to them was through the Logos, which was reason, which was the mind of God. And they said this was the gateway to Theos. The gateway to Theos was through reason. Now, you want to compare that to Abraham, right? Well, Abraham in the Bible, he says these gods here, the wood statues and these familial gods that we have, they're made of wood or they're made of stone. These aren't actually gods, and the moon isn't really a god, and water isn't really God. So it was the same kind of reasoning. It was the same kind of reasoning that these things aren't really gods, but there is a real God, a creator, source of the universe. And that's like the story of Abraham. Well, we had the same story in Athens, but that one was lost in favor of the story of Abraham. Why? Because that became the dominant thing. Because it merged. But what I'm telling you is, in Athens, that's exactly what they did. And they did it in 500 BC, and they did that actually before that with Pythagoras. So Pythagoras was kind of like, whether he was or not, he's looked at as the originator of this line of thinking, is that they had abandoned the gods they had abandoned the pagan gods in favor of Theos. And then through Heraclitus coined the word logos, meaning the reason rooted in truth, or the governing principle of the universe. Because he said that there's a law governing how the universe, the changes in the universe, that it has a rhythm, and that it has the variations of energy, that this is all following a law, and that law would of course come from Theos. So that's what they did. Hopefully that helps answer your questions. So anyway, I don't know what else to say. That's what happened. So Theos was written into the Bible, the Old Testament. I'm just reading it right here. I've got the Blue Letter Bible, Genesis, Septuagint, And it says, here we have the word theos and theos and theos and theos, and it's all over the place. And they wrote that in there on purpose. So, yeah. Now, so I went back and looked at, well, how was Zeus spelled? Because I'm like, well, maybe it's just Zeus. No, it's not. How was Zeus spelled in Greek? It's spelled differently. Similar, but differently. Differently on purpose. Differently on purpose. It's not the same thing. And then it was then the spelling changed again with the Romans, and they called it Deus with a D. So the spelling changed, but I don't know. Hopefully that helps answer some questions. So what I'm trying to say, why am I even talking about this? What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of confusion about this subject. And that's why I was kind of talking about the rabbis, because a lot of Christians, okay, my mother went to a church where they taught her that Jews were God's chosen people. Okay, that's what they taught my mother. And they're teaching people, this is what the CIA is teaching people all over the world, that the Jews are God's chosen people. And they gave us God. They told us who God was. And so we need to follow the Jews. We need to follow the rabbis. They're the holy people. We need to follow. This is all crazy nonsense. First of all, in the Old Testament, if you just want to look purely at the Old Testament, nowhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament, does the God of Israel ever make a covenant with Jews. He makes a covenant with Abraham, and he makes a covenant with Jacob, who is the father of the 12 tribes. And so this is called Israel. And among those 12 tribes, one of the tribes is called Judah. But nowhere is it, and God says that Judah are the chosen people, and none of these other people matter anymore. It's just them. And of course, it's just the rabbis who say what the religion is. And, that's the whole argument of the New Testament, of the Gospels. If you want to know what the argument is in the Gospels, it's the Word of God called Christ, the Logos, Christ, the King of Judah, because the Word of God is supposed to be the King of Judah, and then the Word of the rabbis. Like you read Maimonides, it's all this perplexing stuff, and then they have all their special rules and they're all their regulations, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And all these regulations, traditions, which they invented, but they say so this is the interesting thing. So they said so their word became the king. You see, the word of the rabbis became the king. That's what the rabbis were saying. You have to listen to us. What are we saying? We have these traditions. You have to follow our traditions that we invented, or this is going to happen, or you're going to get punished, or whatever, right? This was the argument. It was the argument between the word of the rabbis, called Barabbas, and the word of God, called Jesus Christ, the Logos. Jesus, of course, means God is salvation. So the name Jesus has a meaning, which is God is salvation. And of course, Jesus is God's word. In the story of the Gospels, Jesus is God's word, which is born as a man among the Jews, among the Judeans, and he's killed by the rabbis. The rabbis have him arrested, and then they have him tortured, and then they have him put to death at a place called the Skull. And what do the rabbis do when they pray? They take a little box and they stick it on their head. And in that box, it represents God's word, the Torah, the law. They stick that on their head. And that's where Jesus Christ goes to die, at the place called the Skull. And it's all a beautiful, it's all very beautiful. So that's the story. So why do people not understand that story? In part is because they don't know what Barabbas is. That's another thing. There's a lot of words that are misunderstood. Now, just like you got to understand the word Ha-ethanim means the beginning of the year. That's a holiday which occurs in autumn. And then you have the Orthodox Jews, they call God Hashem, right? Hashem, which means the light. but they're all following the rabbinical teachings. And in Christianity, we say Christ is the light. So this is the part where it gets kind of interesting. But what I'm saying is there's the word ha there. Now, the word ha is a new word, or it's kind of like a different, depending on the dialect, it could also be ba. And so ba and ha are both used before the, I don't know my grammar that well, but like ha ethnym, you could also say ba ethnym. The beginning of the year, like the beginning. Ba rabbis means the rabbis. Ba rabbis means the rabbis. Most people don't know this, that ba rabbis means the rabbis. And so they didn't know what the word meant. So they thought it was bar abbas, because they knew what Abba is father. So they said, well, maybe it's bar abbas, son of the father. Nothing makes sense, right? Because it's not bar abbas, it's ba rabbis, the rabbis. See, so when you read the story and you see Jesus, the word of God, standing next to Ba Rabbas, the word of the rabbis, and so you're given a choice. One is pure, one is holy, one is sinless, and one is a criminal, a dirty, filthy criminal, Barabbas. And you're given this choice. And you say, which do you choose? And with one voice they shouted, give us Barabbas. Give us the rabbis. We want the word of the rabbis. We don't want the word of God. We don't want God's spoken word, the logos. We want Barabbas. We want the rabbis. That's the meaning of the allegory of Jesus and Barabbas. They want the rabbis. They want Maimonides. They want to hear all this word salad. You know, you think I don't want to talk about politicians, but you want to hear a word salad, read the writings of Maimonides. It's just a word salad. It doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't lead anywhere. So anyway, oh yeah. So what was I going to say? So the other word that has been misunderstood is the name Abraham or Abram. So if you look up, this is the thing. These words have been confused for a very long time. But if you look up the word Abram, and if you look it up in Google Dictionary or Oxford or any of these university dictionaries, they have the wrong meaning of the word. It doesn't mean exalted father, which is what they think it means. It actually means father of Aram. Now, there is a figure in Genesis named Ram, and his name is also Aram. So it's Ram or it's Aram. And Ram is just short for Aram. And that refers to the Aramaeans, the Aramaic people who inhabited that territory from northern Iraq across Syria, which we call the Crescent. So that territory was inhabited by a race of people called the Aramaeans. And they're, of course, adopted, they of course went down into Canaan, and it's particularly in the north where the Aramaeans, where you get the language called Aramaic. So Abram, and I don't know that anyone else is going to tell you this definition of the word, but everyone needs to know this if they're going to read the Bible, that Abram means father of the Aramaeans. He's the father of the Aramaeans. That's what that word means. It doesn't mean exalted father. The reason they came up with that is because they didn't know what it meant. It means father of the Aramaeans. Then it becomes Abraham, means the father of many nations, because the Aramaic people spread around, they spread down into Canaan and into Egypt and became many nations. They wish to deify the flesh. So Abraham became Abram, but Abraham has a meaning, which is the father of Aram. So why is that important? Because it's important when you're reading these books that you should know what some of these words mean. And I don't really know if there's anything else I can tell you about this subject, because there's really not a lot else to it. There's lots of books. There's lots of stories. There's stories of Samson and Solomon And Solomon, you know, he wants wisdom. You know, he wants the logos. He wants wisdom. But I guess the thing that got me started on this was, number one, in Christianity, Christ alone is supposed to be your pastor. And this is what got me back to this church where these ridiculous pastors, and it's not this, that one. They're all over the place. I see them on Twitter. They're arguing with people. There's like the Seth Dillon, Babylon Bee. They think that they're the pastor and they're going to tell you how it is. And the Jews are God's chosen. See, it's this some weird thing. Christ is supposed to be the pastor, which is the logos. That's supposed to be the pastor. And that's why in Matthew 23:8, it says, never call yourself a rabbi, for you are all brethren, and Christ alone is the teacher. I'm paraphrasing. But you're not supposed to go to some pastor and he's going to tell you everything. Now, a minister, I'm trying to be like a minister. I'm just trying to assist you. I'm just trying to assist you with giving you some explanations of things, which will then help you to follow the logos. So you can go on and follow the logos, and the logos will be your pastor, and the logos will tell you the truth, and the logos will direct you for your life. Not me. I don't want to be the pastor. I want to be like a minister. I just want to help you. If you need, and you can help me. We'll help each other. For we're all brothers, and Christ alone is the pastor. He's the teacher. The Christ is the teacher. Not some pastor, not some ADL, pastor who works with the CIA and Mossad. That's not the pastor. And the Pope's not the pastor. No man is your pastor. It's supposed to be the logos. That's the doctrine also of the Athenians, and that's why these two religions or philosophies. I wouldn't call. That's what I'm saying. Christianity is not really a religion; it's a philosophy. And what the Athenians had was a philosophy, and their philosophy, both in Athens, they abandoned the pagan gods, and among the Israelites, they abandoned the other gods. Now, the difference is the Israelites did continue to practice very pagan rituals, which were abandoned actually by the Athenians long before that, by the Stoics. The Stoics weren't sacrificing animals to Theos, never, because they were beyond that. Okay, the Israelites did continue to sacrifice animals and have a temple and have blood rituals. Moses was carrying out blood rituals, and Aaron was carrying out blood rituals with animal sacrifices and putting blood on his face and taking blood from the altar and throwing it on the crowd. So there was a lot of blood paganism rituals going on in the Israelite religion, which didn't occur, which wasn't happening among the Athenians. They had abandoned all that. So anyway, these two religions these two philosophies came together because the philosophy of Athens was used to explain much of the Old Testament. That's why they wrote Theos in, the source of the universe, the creator, so that it wouldn't be identified with any pagan deities. So anyway, I'm actually a big fan of some of the stories in the Old Testament. So the Old Testament has a theme. It has a theme, and so what the Israelites, when they wrote the Old Testament, they wrote a theme into the Old Testament that was based on a solar theme, which was God and His Word, which is like the light. So the reason why there's a solar theme in the Bible is not because they're worshiping the sun in the sky. Like they're not sun worshipers. They're not pagan sun worshipers. But what they did is they wrote into their doctrine that the sun is like God's Word, and that the sun itself and the 12 tribes following the sun are like them. It's like them as a people following God's word. So it was used metaphorically, is what I'm saying. That they weren't worshiping the sun. There's no suns in their old. They didn't have images of suns and stuff. It was just they would write the sun as a theme into their books to transmit the story. And so that's why I'll finish off in telling you, how do I know this? Because Noah's Ark is the sun. If you read Noah's Ark and you think it's about water, then you've misunderstood the story. So the reason why the story got confused is that is that the old calendar. So on our calendar, the year starts in December, which is the 10th month, December 10th, which is the time of the winter solstice. So we begin our year at the winter solstice, which is a fine time to do it. It makes sense. It's the European. It's the it's the Nordic. I think this is a Nordic tradition to have the year beginning in winter, in the beginning winter, this winter solstice. But in the old calendar of the ancient Chaldean, Babylonian, Sumerian, Canaanite, and Greek, and the Greeks, they began the year in spring. So the year began in spring. And so in the old Babylonian calendar, March, the time of the spring equinox, was like ground zero. That was that was considered month number 1. And the 2 months on either side of that. So you think of March as the top of the calendar that goes in a circle. So March is number 1. And then, so the second month of the year is associated with the Taurus, the bull, or Reuben, the tribe of Reuben. And so this is the first month. No, I'm sorry, that's like the second month. That's month number 2. And that's Taurus. And so anyway, you go through the zodiac and everything and the calendar. So the calendar has the months, right? And so so you start with the spring equinox, the month of the spring equinox. Now the month means moon, so it's the new moon till the last moon, and within that moon phase, you'd have the spring equinox occurring somewhere in between that moon phase. That would tell you what month it is. That's month number 1 in the old calendar. Now the second month would be the second moon phase. So so you have to understand. So the year begins in March. The year begins in March in the old calendar. So when you go back and you read Noah's Ark, which is why I'm telling you this, the month starts in the flood starts in the second month, and you think it's a flood of water because there's an old book called the story of Ziusudra, or the story of Xisuthros, or the story of Gilgamesh, or the ancient King's List of Samaria, which says that there was a flood, and they wrote stories about a flood. And the pagan stories of the flood. Well, the Genesis story is not the pagan story of the flood. It's the new story of the Israelites, and it has a solar theme. So so what I'm going to tell you is, in the new story of the flood that you find in Genesis, it's not about water. And so all the people that have been reading this book and they thought it was about water, they're confused. It follows the calendar, and I'll tell you exactly how you can see this for yourself, so you don't have to believe me. The flood starts in spring. And for 40 days it rains, and that takes you right into June, which is the month of the summer solstice. Then the flood continues. See, people think, oh, it flooded for 40 days. No, it takes 40 days for the ship to rise up off the ground and begin to move. Then it continues. The flood continues until so that's June. That's the month of the summer solstice. Then it continues on until autumn, which is September, which is the 7th month, September, the month of the autumn equinox. And on the 17th day, I believe, it ends. And that takes you right to the autumn equinox. So you have to understand, it's the story of Noah's Ark is the story of the sun going through the calendar. And what's flooding the earth is the light. And the light is God's word. And so Noah, he's right. He's a righteous man. So he follows God's word, and he's saved. He's saved by God's word, which manifests as the ark, the sun. And everyone else who denies God's word, they all die, right? What kills them? In the story, they're killed by a flood. But a flood of what? A flood of light. It's the light that kills them. They're killed by the light. It's not water. So in the story of Noah's Ark, the sun rises up into summer, and then it stops in autumn. And then the water, or light, recedes through the winter. It recedes through the winter, and then the land starts to appear again because the water's receding. So it follows the light. The light rises up through spring into summer, and it floods the earth, and then it stops in autumn, and then it recedes through winter. just like Noah's Ark, just like the story of Noah's Ark. The whole story of Noah's Ark is the story of the calendar, and the entire and so they wrote it this way to teach you that God's word is the light, and God's word is the truth. So it's given a solar theme. But what I'm trying to say is they're not worshiping the sun. They gave it a solar theme. Now, do the rabbis know this? Has a rabbi told you this? Does Maimonides know this? No, they have a word salad. They have a big word salad. So whose book is this? It belongs to whoever can read it. They can't read it. The rabbis can't read it. That's why they invented all their own stuff. They don't know what any of this is about. And we're told they're God's chosen people. We're all supposed to worship them, and they're going to be in charge of everything. This is idiotic. It's idiotic. They can't even read the book. They don't know what it's about. That's why they're writing all these word salad books by Maimonides and all this other garbage that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. What's the story of Noah's Ark? What's the story of Noah's Ark about? It's about God. God's word is the light, and the light meaning the truth. And the truth saves you. You're saved by the truth. And it kills all the wicked people. All the wicked people scatter and die because of the truth. The truth, they hate the truth. The whole story is about how they hate the truth. They can't stand the truth. It kills them. They're dying. It's killing them. It's torturing. They're drowning in truth, and they're all dying because they hate it. But Noah loves it, and so he's saved. That's the story. Why didn't the rabbis tell you that? Because they don't know. Why didn't your pastor tell you that? Because he doesn't know. They don't know anything. They don't know anything. And I'm not here to be your pastor. I'm just here to tell you, go look for yourself. Read the story. It'll tell you on this day this happens, and on this day this happens. And if you follow the calendar, you'll see that it follows the old calendar. That's all I'm saying. Let's see what you have to say here. There are people calling themselves Trinitarians who believe in three persons of God, meaning that Jesus was a person as deified flesh. The Father is a person. The Holy Spirit is a person. True. So let me tell you where the Trinity comes from. And you can take it or leave it. My friend Jordan Maxwell used to say, this is what I think. Maybe this is what you think. And we can be friends. Yeah. This is what I'm saying. This is what you're saying. We don't all have to agree on it. You don't have to believe me. I'm just going to tell you what I think. Okay. Based on my own research and looking at it. The Trinity is an actual. So one of the things you should do when you read these books in the Bible is realize, like, let's say I'm going to give an example in the Greek, because I debate atheists on the subject a lot, and they'll say none of the gods are real, not just the Bible, but they'll say no gods were ever real, and it's like, well, Zeus is Jupiter, and Jupiter's real because I can go outside and see Jupiter. And Apollo is real because Apollo is the sun. I can go see the sun. So it's the same in when you're talking about the Logos. The Logos is a real thing. It's not imaginary, right? So it's not a myth. The Logos is a real thing. So now let's take the Trinity. The Trinity is an actual real thing that occurs in heaven. This is so from looking at it, this is what I'm saying. And it's a tradition that goes back to the time of Melchizedek. And it exists in the Ugaritic texts as a poem called the something about, I don't know I can't remember the name of the poem, but it's basically what it is the Trinity is there were three times of prayer in the ancient Canaanite religion around Jerusalem or wherever they had their temple. When Melchizedek was the high priest, Melchizedek means the king of virtue, the king of righteousness, right? He's the king of righteousness, and they followed a solar theme. See, this is where the tradition comes from. And they prayed 3 times a day, and they prayed at dawn before the sun came up, and then noon, at high noon, and then at dusk when the sun went down. Those are the 3 times of prayer, and those three phases of light were one light. So there's 3 phases of light, and that's one light. And so that's where they get the Trinity from, as far as tradition. That's what the tradition. So it's a real thing. Now, yeah, do all these pastors and stuff know what it is? No, they don't. No, they don't. In fact, they go back and read Genesis, and they think that Genesis, where God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." they think that's about the Trinity, and they're wrong. I think it was Tertullian or whoever assumed that that was it. The reason they're wrong is because they didn't have the original Akkadian texts about the Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki are not aliens, but they were just the old Akkadian storm god and water god and planets and all the stars and everything. Those are called the Anunnaki, and there was and so in the Anunnaki texts, which the Israelites changed to teach their religion through the old books, which is how they did it. They took old books like the story of the flood and they made it about their teaching, the light, the truth of God. So they took those old books and they changed them because they were part of their old traditions. See, they converted. They had a new religion, a new philosophy, but they had these old books, so they rewrote them using this new philosophy. And so when the Christians came around later and they're reading this book and it says, and God made man and let us make man in our image after our own likeness, and it uses the plural. They go, well, that must be the Trinity. No, that's not what the Trinity is. The Trinity is the three phases of light. It's dawn, noon, and dusk. So it's an ancient tradition that goes back long, long way among the ancient people of Canaan. No, you need to be. I'm not I'm a minister. I've always been a minister, but not a pastor. Christ is the pastor. Logos is your pastor, not me. I'm not a pastor. I'll never be a pastor because you're not my sheep. We are the sheep that hear the truth of God. We hear God's truth. It says here, Brian, the Father, the Son, yeah. So yeah, the Trinitarians, they need to go back to their roots of Melchizedek and realize that these are the three phases of light which appear in heaven. That's why I believe it's 1 John or something. I don't know the exact thing, but it says, and these three appear in heaven. When it says that this happens in heaven, take that literally, right? The Trinity appears or occurs in heaven. Yes, heaven's the stars. So it's dawn, noon, dusk. These are the three times of prayer. The three lights are one light. So that's the Trinity. And they've turned that into a belief, into a scenario where you get a new body in heaven and Jesus is sacrificing animals in heaven. Yes, that's very strange. It's just they're confused. They're confused and they've got it's the blind leading the blind. That's why, and this is why I'm trying to tell people that if they look up what these words theos and logos meant to the Greeks, it explains the philosophy in a pure way that you don't have to get into all these weird, complex, strange ideas about God and Christ and all this stuff. So yeah, they've definitely misunderstood a lot of that stuff. It says, yes, the Bible is an exercise in truth seeking by means of free will. God wants to be worshipped voluntarily. Yeah. And I would say God is theos. Theos is the creator. And theos is not anything pagan. It's just the divine source of the universe. It's the source of truth, reason. It's the source of natural law. It's the source of when you talk about physics, all the laws of physics. Well, those are laws. So those are laws. So those are ideas, which we call, those are coming from the theos. Theos is the source of the laws of the universe, the laws of one's soul. Reason, truth, these things are all associated with theos, and it's literally not more complicated than that. Yes, you can write all kinds of fancy stories about it, and those can all be really interesting. And people like all those stories because they're so complex that they give you something to think about. But there's really, when you boil it down, there's theos and there's logos, and that's all there is. You need to be a pastor. Yes, Tertullian. Yeah, Tertullian. So what happened with some of the early Christians? They inherited these books, which were written Greek. They were written in Greek, as we've said. And before that, the old books were that were the pre-Israelite books. We'll call them the pre-Israelite flood story. The pre-Israelite Akkadian was the Enuma Elish. So Enuma Elish was the story of the Anunnaki gods and how they came about. So I don't want to. I mean, we can go into this, but if you have questions, but in Egypt, see, it's important to know that in Egypt, God, in Egypt's creation story, is different than the Akkadian creation stories and the Greek. And I'm talking about the pagan Greeks. So in the creation stories of the old creation stories, the gods were thought of it both in terms of male and female, and that two forces came together, produced the gods. So you had two primal gods, the sky and the earth, merged, right? You look at the horizon, you've got the sky and the earth, and then those merged and begat the other gods, right? So it's definitely it's definitely follows this theory of male and female. So they had a creation story about that. That was the Anunnaki gods, and that was how the Greeks gods. That's how Zeus was born and all this kind of stuff. Now in Egypt, you had a different scenario. You had and of course the Egyptian god names were different over periods of time depending on where you're looking at it. But let's take the god Atum. And this is important because this is how the Israelites wrote their doctrine using a solar theme, because they came out of Egypt. So Atum appears as the sun. So you take, so in the creation story of Egypt, there's water. There's like a huge, like everything's just water, and everything's just massive water. Just think of everything as water. And then Atum appears as the sun. And he's the self-created God, appears as the sun, and the sun is burning off the water around him, becomes steam and air, so clouds and air. And then this continues on, and land appears, and sky. So what I'm trying to say is the Egyptian creation theory is different than the other pagans, in that you had the sky and the earth combining to make gods. Whereas in the Egyptian theory, you had God, a self-created being, appearing as the sun and creating the world through burning off the water, and air appears and clouds appear, and then the sky and the earth appears, and then the other gods come out of that, right? So in other words, all the gods come out of this one God who appears as the sun. This is the theme that is then adopted by the Israelites and written into their old books. So that explains a lot. Now, of course, the Israelites aren't worshiping other gods, right? So they're not worshiping any other gods. So the first god of Egypt is called Atum, the sun. So the Israelites not worshiping the Egyptian gods, and there's a reason why, is because when the people came down into the land of Goshen, northern Egypt, we're talking 2000 BC here, okay? So you got to understand that before 2000 BC, there was a history that none of us really know, because there's no record of it. The only record we have of ancient history of Egypt and Chaldea and Samaria is the records of the Akkadians and the Sumerians and the Egyptians at that time, because everything else, whatever was before that, got demolished, got wiped out, or deteriorated, or whatever happened. It was gone. And so where history begins for us in the West in 2000 BC, what do we have? We have this race of people called the Amorites, or the Akkadian race, the Akkadian script, the Amorite, we'll call them the Amorite race, okay? They control all of northern Egypt, and they control Canaan, and they control Syria, and they control Iraq. This race called the Amorite race. They're the dominant race, and they control everything. They control all the Middle East, they control Egypt, and they control Iraq, and they've subdued the original bloodline of Egypt, which was in the middle between. So in Egypt, you have the Amorites took all the north, and then the black sub-Saharan Africans, they took the south, and right in the middle you have the original Egyptian race, and they're now squeezed between these two people, the black Africans who control the south, and the Amorite race, which controls northern Egypt, and they're ruling as pharaohs. So you've got Amorite race ruling as pharaohs in northern Egypt, and you've got black sub-Saharan Africans ruling as pharaohs in the south. And in the middle, you have the original royal bloodline of Egypt, and they're ruling their little territory that they've been shrunken down into. And this is 2000 BC. From 2000 BC to 1550 BC. This is the situation. Now, what else is going on throughout the Middle East is all throughout Canaan and Syria and Iraq. You have this powerful race, the Amorites, and they've got the Babylonian Empire, and they've got Hammurabi, father of the Amorites. That's what that means. Hammurabi, the father of the Amorites, and he's ruling Babylon. And you've got these different tribes through Jordan and Syria and Canaan, and they rule all that territory. And these are the old Amorite kings, and they rule Egypt. And then, so that this is 2000. They're at the peak of their power. They're at the peak of their power. And right down there in Egypt, you've got this tiny little sliver where the original Egyptian race is all squeezed and contained. And then from 2000 BC to 1550 BC, this massive, powerful race of people called the Amorites start to deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate, and they start to lose ground. And who do they lose ground to? In the north, they're losing ground to the Aryans. The Aryans are coming down from the north, and they're capturing all of this territory of northern territory of Syria, and they're the Hittites, and they're the the different race, Haran, the Mitanni. They're taking all this territory. The Aryans are taking all the territory from these people in the north, and they're coming down. And so the Akkadian race is now deteriorating. The Amorites are deteriorating and dispersing, and they're just losing everything to these Aryans that are coming down from the north. And at the same time, in Egypt, because these Amorite race, who are now ruling as pharaohs, they're calling themselves the pharaohs. Now, the interesting thing about them is they're worshiping Set. And Set is the storm god. Set is the storm god of Egypt, which was never a primary god of the Egyptian. Was it Set? Yeah, Set. He was never the primary god of the Egyptian pantheon, right? But so they've got Set. I believe it's Set, the storm. Yeah, he's like the desert god. He's the god of the desert and the storms and stuff. Anyway, what happens is as the Amorite race deteriorates from 2000 BC to 1500 BC, the Aryans take the north. They've got all the northern territories now. They're ruling everything. And Ahmos, meaning born of the moon, rises up in Thebes, the capital of Thebes, and he raises an army and takes out all the north and all the sub-Saharan Africans in the south. So all the black Africans in the south and all these Amorite race people in the north, they all get displaced as far as they still inhabit the territory, but the royal bloodline of Egypt is revived and reconquers all of they take back all of Egypt and Canaan all the way up to the top where the Hittites are up there. So that so now the Egyptian race now has recaptured the throne of Egypt, and now it's their empire, and they rule over everybody. And they're over the people in the north, and they're over the blacks in the south, and they have all the territory through Canaan, all the way to the Egyptian, toward the Hittite empires. They have everything now. The Egyptian race has been restored to the throne, and this is the original bloodline. They're the original people, right? And so it's their thing, and they've reconquered everything. This is 1550 BC. So then what happens is some of these racial Amorites were left over, right? They're not in power anymore, but they're still, they were the kings. They were the pharaohs. They were calling themselves pharaoh. So they were still connected to these royal aristocracy. They were still, everyone knew who they were. but now they're just out of power. But because they're still around from 1550 BC to around 1200 BC, they are still involved in Egyptian politics. And so somewhere around, but see, this irritates the Egyptian bloodline, the royal bloodline. They're irritated by these people. Some of them like them, and some of them are just irritated. Like, you're not even supposed to be here, right? You're not part of our thing. We're the royal bloodline, and you came down here and you took our stuff, and you're still hanging around, and we don't like you, and we're going to kill you. And so this is what happened around 1200 BC. Is there was a second purge of the remaining people that were part of this royal Amorite bloodline called the Hyksos people, the foreign kings, right? And so there was certain personalities among these people that were in Egypt, and some of them were brutally murdered. And so they were called by the Egyptians, they were called the Irsu. They were called the atheists. They didn't worship the Egyptian gods. They weren't even the Egyptian race. They were looked at as a foreign race. They didn't follow their gods, and they didn't belong there. They didn't want them in their royal courts. They didn't want their input in politics. They just wanted to get rid of them. And so they started to assassinate them. And this is what happened in Egyptian history. And it appears similar to the story of Moses. It appears similar to that. And so kind of somewhere along this line, they must have just left. But there were always been these people remaining in Egypt forever, I suppose. But some of them left. So somewhere along the line, these people decided they were abandoning. Well, they kind of squirreled away. If you read the books in the 5 books of Moses, there were a lot of that stuff comes from Egypt. This idea of a golden ark as Egyptian, and the Jews misinterpreted the side lock, which in Egypt, if you watched Charlton Heston in the Old Testament Moses story, that little boy's got the side lock. Well, the Jews misinterpreted that, and they got these side locks. So they think they're supposed to grow out their side locks over here. Anyway, they took a lot of stuff from Egypt and incorporated that and kind of squirreled it away and made it a new thing. And they left Egypt. Some of them, they started their own priesthood, and they left Egypt, and they went out into the Sinai, and then they went up and it spread up into Judah and that whole territory of Canaan. But the thing you have to understand too is that the god of Thebes, which became the king of the Egyptian pantheon, the king of the gods of Thebes, was called Amen. Amen is the hidden one. So yes, there are images. If you look in Egypt, you can do an image search and see pictures or images of Amen. But Amen was in Egypt was considered the hidden one. So among the priesthood, there is no image of Amen. Amen could not really be understood as an object, but is the supernatural, invisible force of the universe. They called this Amen, and the Greeks adopted this. They started calling Zeus Hammon Zeus. Hammon Zeus. They added Amen to Zeus. In other words, Amen was the invisible force of God behind the universe. And so in Christianity, we end our prayers with Amen, and the Jews end their prayers with Amen, and the Muslims use the word Amen. And Amen was the god of Thebes. So and that was the god of because so what that represents, Amen is the hidden one. And so anyway, these are just some of the meanings of the words. But so when the Israelites wrote their book, they squirreled away, like like a squirrel puts things in his cheeks and he runs off and he hides it and he keeps it. He's like, I'm taking this with me, and he goes and stashes it somewhere. They squirreled away because you understand the Hyksos kings were indoctrinated into all the wisdom of Egypt. They had all the ancient books, and they were there with the pyramids and the priests and everything, right? So they had all this tradition of the temples of Egypt, and they took this away with them as the Israelites, and they were now in the desert with a tent called the tabernacle, reenacting these things in the desert and establishing a new order, a new religious order in in Canaan, and that's really the story of the Israelites. So I think I've said it all. I don't know that there's anything else to say. I hope this helps. And it was I want everyone to enjoy their Sunday, and there you go. Have a nice day. Thanks for participating, by the way. I really enjoyed your questions. Thank you. Take care.